Thanks very much, and thanks to everybody. So I've been at 1 or 2 HRV conferences where I've listened to the rapporteur and thought I didn't get any of that, and were we at the same meeting? So I really hope that you don't have that experience, but I can't guarantee it. So what I'd like to do is start backwards and just go from some things that I pulled out about session 4 and then 3, and then, even though I wasn't really asked, just 1 or 2 things about session 1 and 2. And then maybe we'll have, because it's going to be brief, we'll have some time left over for how this group wants to take things forward and which issues. So in terms of session 4, which was trying to support engagement really through different stakeholders, it seemed to me, and different role players, I think we heard, just trying to stand above it a little bit, we were hearing about how different stakeholders can really strategically support engagement. In other words, ethics guideline developers, donors, RECs, activists, and institutions. That all those stakeholders essentially have different levers to pull, different levers to press. And I'm trying to use Jim's term that it's the strategically we need to be thinking about, and thinking very intelligently about how all of these actors can push their levers to try and support excellent engagement in the field. In terms of session 3, which was really about supporting engagement through ethics guidance, just 2 things that I'd like to pull out. Firstly, we heard that the process of guideline development is often a sensitive and political issue and is likely to be highly scrutinized. And we heard from Nuffield and GPP and GCP and WHO and UNICEF about the importance of early engagement, especially of groups that are at risk of being marginalized, their voices not being incorporated. Those could be groups, they could also be settings. In other words, getting the north-south balance correct and just making sure that those voices are incorporated, and not just to improve the content, but really to improve the perceived legitimacy. And that one threat to poor uptake and poor implementation of guidelines, and it's not the only threat because there are multiple ones, but one real threat is early neglect of affected stakeholders, and it's a sort of surefire way to make sure that they stay on the shelf. Secondly, we also heard that many people are building on the work of guidelines, so often not reinventing the wheel, but keeping the strengths of guidelines, jettisoning perhaps what's not so helpful, and trying to adapt those norms in new contexts and to new demands like COVID. So that was session 3. And then just for session 1 and 2, and again, I'm going outside my brief here, so I hope that Sean will forgive me, but we really heard in session 1 and 2 how people are working across different contexts and really facing considerable ethical complexities and really striving to do the right thing in terms of their engagement. And I think we heard an enormous amount of who is being engaged, that sort of multiplicity of players, when engagement should be happening. We heard a really massive amount of how engagement happens, so multiple strategies and techniques, some of them quite novel and interesting, especially to me, and also some emerging ideas about why people engage. But what I wanted to just leave you with is that, and I also think we are starting to enjoy ethics guidance that provides more and more direction on those very issues. Why engage, who to engage, when to engage. But what I worry about sometimes, and it only came up 1 or 2 times in sessions 1 and 2, is the issue of how much to engage. And there were 1 or 2 instances in those sessions where people argued or questioned things like, what is our responsibility to really address massive structural inequalities and poverties and injustices, and other questions around how much do we have to respond, or how much should we respond, how far should we go to respond to community inputs. To me, these are questions about how much do we engage, and they go to issues around, can we ever set defensible limits on engagement? What's reasonable, what's justified, when has there been enough? And I think that in the ethics guidelines, we don't enjoy enough direction about that. And I wonder, it's not just an academic issue. I think it's something that really faces people on the ground. And that whole issue about how much perhaps was a very small implicit theme and a much less explicit theme in sessions 1 and 2, but I'd like to flag it. Yes, and I'm going to stop there, and I hope we've got at least 10 minutes for people to respond and decide how they would like to take some of these conversations forward. Thank you.